Let's turn our attention back to the United States, where unrest is continuing. And Joe Siracusa, our political analyst, joins me for a little more now. What do you make of what's going on right now at the moment? It's just the next chapter, isn't it, Joe, in these ongoing stoushes that are running between, protesters, if you like, civilians, innocents, and ICE agents?
Good morning, Pete. Yeah, it is a really bad chapter, as a matter of fact. But look, you and I and other people who watch the news, we could see this coming. We have 3,000 ICE agents in Minneapolis, a city of about 430,000, with only 600 cops. A couple of years ago, some genius decided to defund the police. So we got police who aren't getting any cooperation from the federal authorities. The federal authorities, which are not helping the police at all. And we got politicians saying that their citizens are being killed. Now, look, it's quite clear that both sides are going to have to stand down on this. I think the ICE agents are going to have to cool it. I think the people who are protesting are going to have to tamp this thing down too. And look, I know this guy was shot 10 times, and he didn't put up a fight. I saw this in the 60s when the police opened fire on the anti-war protesters and the civil rights movement like this. So I've seen this story before. The thing is that bringing a gun to a peaceful protest is probably not a good idea, even if the Second Amendment allows him to carry a gun. You got a lot of these. It's just a bad idea.
No, well, that's the point. I mean, but this is the problem, isn't it? When the Second Amendment. It is the right to bear arms, but that's not the case in all instances, is it, Joe? I mean, that's not something that you and I would do. Is to take a gun to a protest, because, and having been to these things, and I was talking to Michael Ware before, having been to these sort of protests where tensions are running high, and these ICE agents and American police, they're not mucking around, and they've only got split-second decisions. These things can happen. I mean, not saying it's okay, but that's just how things are right now.
Yeah, and once they draw their weapons and adrenaline starts pumping, they barely have control over what happens next. But look, this is nothing new. In 1968, after Martin Luther King was killed, there were riots all over America, and in Chicago, Mayor Daley, the Democratic Mayor Daley that I grew up with, ordered the Chicago police to shoot looters and to maim protesters. So this idea of going after your own citizens in a moment of desperation, there's nothing new. I mean, America hasn't gone down a new road. This is an old road. And as you know, America's a very violent place. As Stokely Carmichael used to say, it's as violence is American as cherry pie. And so, people are going to just have to cool this. Now, the New York Times has come out this morning and said that the Trump administration is lying to them and they need a congressional investigation. So I'd like to see Congress sort of buffer, come to the party here and sort of buffer the federal government from everybody else, or separate the parties, put them in their own corners. But look, there's going to be more of this, but I think Donald Trump's going to have to be very careful here politically because he's coming up to the midterms, and this could be very, very bad news when the Democrats return to government in November 2026.
Yeah, most incumbents generally go backwards. That's what history tells us when it comes to the midterms. But by how much this time, we'll see. Joe, thank you. You know, open carry is something that we're not familiar with here, but it is legal in the Twin Cities. But here's my thought. If you take a weapon to a heated protest, though, are you asking for trouble? Having been to some of those protests in the US where the coppers mean business, right? Things happen very fast. They can escalate very fast. But if you've got a gun on your hip, are you asking for trouble when split-second decisions are made?
Well, it's certainly not something that I would do, that I would take a weapon to a protest. But we don't know how spontaneous this was. He may walk around with that all day, every day, and just happen to see this event. So we don't know that because there's so much we don't know. And what the state government is saying is that the shooters are investigating themselves. Department of Homeland Security says, we're going to investigate this, no one else. We'll just look at ourselves. Whereas normally, local, state or city law enforcement begins these investigations. Now, the local police went to the scene to investigate, and the Border Patrol agents wouldn't let the local police onto the scene. So they went to a local court, got an order that said that these police should be allowed to see the scene. They were still denied. So they went to the federal court, and there's going to be a hearing tomorrow. But so there was dueling presses by the Minnesota governor and the Border Patrol agents at the exact same time. And they were arguing dueling narratives. One says that he was committing a felony. The other, the chief of police there, says he was exercising his First and Second Amendment right.
Yeah, no, we did run part of that a little earlier in the program. They were up at the same time, and we swung from one to the other and did notice that as well, Michael. Just a final point, though. When you say it's an inflection point, or when others saying it's an inflection point, what do they mean by that? I mean, Donald Trump's not going to change course, is he?
Well, no, but we have seen him change course under intense pressure, particularly from his base. And I have to tell you this, what the polls here are showing, for what it's worth, is that whilst, many people still support immigration reform and tougher immigration policies, almost 2/3 of Americans, including Republicans, do not support these kind of operations or the way that President Trump is trying to enforce his policy. So, they may be doing more damage to themselves, and the inflection point could be that these are raising such tensions that this is going to foment either more violence or certainly creating more division. As the mayor of Minneapolis said, as we saw Chicago, Portland, here in Los Angeles were the precursors to Minneapolis. Minneapolis, America, is a precursor to what's coming next to where you are.
Okay.